welcome back. Happy New Year. We're in the garden. We have got a dog for company, but you can't see him for the moment. He might be the big reveal as we go through our new set of, first set of the year book reviews. First one up, a cozy crime isolation group. You know, one of those stories where you get a small group and you pop them into an isolated setting, and from there on it's a question of working out who is or who are the baddies. Tom Hindle, his new book, Death in the Arctic, it's his fourth. The first one, A Fatal Crossing, was one of my very big faves, but I must be about 4 or 5 years ago now. He has been sort of, given this title of the kind of Agatha Christie, taking on the Agatha Christie mantle, and does very consistently across his novels put all the characters into a setting, opting sometimes for the locked room story at the same time. In this one, lots of things I loved. I liked an Arctic setting. I liked a really original premise, which was a new company setting up airships, balloon, helium fired. That was a bit of an issue, but, airships for luxurious, stately travel. And in this story, we have it's like a sort of a pre-selection, sort of, it's a run-through of how this whole thing would work when we have our very wealthy clients coming aboard. And we're going to see how all of that goes. So in the Arctic, we have a substantial cast of characters. We have the two brains behind this, Howard, who's an older man who has been friends with the father of the younger brain who's come in and actually fired up, got this whole thing going, called Ezra. And Ezra has issues with his past, with his relationship with his father, but it has held tightly to the dream that this dream that was his father's, and he has now kind of inhabited it. So he is all passion, all fire, and will do what it takes to get the company up and running. There's a rival company that we find out later that's trying to do the same thing, but we're going to see how we're going to try skyline. This Osprey is going to be the first. They're going to be pioneers. The crew that comes, we start with the guests. The guests that come are childhood friends. Some of them have been, in the industry of travel. They're a wealthy food writer and his petulant partner. We have Devon, who's a guide for those very sort of ultimate risk adventures that he takes select people on. We've got a blogger, we've got an eco-aware blogger, we have a photographer, and various others. There's no point in naming them all because there is a cast list at the beginning, which you can refer back to. And I find you don't really need it, but every now and then. And then the crew. And the crew, we have all sorts. We've got a captain who's desperately trying to keep control of things as they spiral a little bit out of control, very much out of control. And a couple of people who have backstories. We've got a very talented barman, but he's sort of, is he suspicious? It's kind of, the thing that Hindle does is he sets you up with these red flags or sort of, no, they're more like flashing signs saying, watch this thing, like somebody may have an allergy. Are we going to use that? Yes, there's helium. Yes, there's things that don't work. There is a murder. And then there is another one. Were they accidents? Were they not? How did it all happen? It's great fun. It's cozy. It's highly improbable in places. And if you want to nitpick, you could sort of say lots of things about it. But my golden rule is that as long as I'm entertained, an author can get away with murder. Ha ha, literally. Second one up. The Cicada House by Ella Ward, and this is a debut Australian I love this book. I mean, I won't talk to you about a book if I haven't found something I really loved in it. This one is it's a relationship domestic drama, sassy, funny, poignant, uplifting book with a little, or quite a big splash of something quite different. And I think this is what makes it kind of stand out from those relationship books where it follows a kind of maybe a well-worn path of a relationship where you have husband and wife and they're not getting on. And in this particular story, we have Caitlin, who has been married to Paul for a while, but she's suddenly come into some money from grandparents who were the people who raised her for most of her life. Though we do learn she had been born in Australia, which is why the Australian connection is very important. She comes into money on the day she's going to tell Paul that she's coming to this money and they're going to do this fabulous trip. He actually sort of says, right, I'm having an affair with someone and they're having a baby. And of course, the baby is something Caitlin can't give him. And what I particularly liked about Ward's handling of this is that we're not straight in this, oh, goody and baddie, not apportioning blame. And there is a story, there are sides to it. And as the book develops, we will get a balanced view of that because there is balance. So Caitlin gets very drunk, gets very unhappy, sobs on the shoulder of her husband's sister and her wife. And that's a nice relationship because it's Ward writes into this space of you may have a great relationship with sister-in-law and that family, and how fragile does that become when you're having relationship difficulties or a breakup with their brother, your husband. In a kind of a moment of, shall we say, drunken irrationality, Caitlin books a flight to Australia, ends up on the coast of somewhere in Victoria, having booked herself a house which doesn't turn out to be what she gets. She ends up in this Cicada house of the title. And this is ramshackle, run down, very quaint, very cutesy, not what she really had been looking for or what she thought she was going to get. She puts up with it. She's got access to a little beach. It's very private. And it's full of memory, let's put it that way. She makes friends with the man who seems to run the grocery shop, but as it turns out, he runs the lodge. So we have this architectural dream building for retreat, for writing retreats, for wellness retreats, all sorts of things that's up on the cliffs. And she has seen a documentary about this, and there's a lot of lovely work on space, on place, who inhabits it, who has designed it. There are other characters who pop in and out of the story, like her friendship. It's about friendship. She's a friendship with the girl who found her, or who was meant to find her original rental. Friendship with Charles, who part-time works in the greengrocers, but actually runs this lodge. Then there is the daughter of the actual architect. We're talking a lot, and at the same time, Caitlin wants to find out who her mother was. She'd been raised in Australia for several years, and then her mother was killed in a car crash. Father unknown, member of a rock band. So there's a lot of story going on. But what Ella Ward does almost magically, and there's a kind of magic in this book, is tell us or ask us to think about grief, about losing a life partner, about how we must learn to have conversations, that shutting things down because we're in grief, or shutting things down because we don't know how to interact socially, will never help us, so that we have to learn to open. And it's about how also with the help of a relationship with a man who comes to fix up things in this ramshackle cottage with which she seems to be terribly familiar. He's obviously been there before. How that teaches her to open up. Look, it's warm. You get great fuzzy feelings. you're rooting for Caitlin all the way along. And I loved the kind of maturity behind Ward's way of getting us to look at relationships and look at what we get wrong and look at forgiveness and look at tentative steps, the little things we can do to open up conversations and to accept, the silences and why they were there. And the way we can find out things that we thought were this and now are this. It's very glorious. It's very complex. It's a super book club read. And, bathed in a golden glow. Totally loved it. And the last one probably differentiates itself from these first two by having a slightly slimmer cast and therefore a kind of a more straightforward narrative, and loses nothing by doing this, is Life Hacks for a Little Alien by Alice Franklin. It's also a debut novel, and it's England set in the 90s up to the 2000s. And it's called Life Hacks for a Little Alien because there is someone who is talking to us and talking to this little alien, who is someone who feels like they come from another planet. And yes, we're in this area of maybe neurodivergent, someone who takes the world or finds the world difficult to understand or to decode. So it's very much this feeling of decoding the universe I'm in. And it's told in this second person voice, which is the person who is telling Little Alien story, is speaking to them and telling them what they're feeling and telling them how they're going to react and kind of watching things unfold and telling them where the story, their life story might go to. Our little alien is never named because she also stands for every child who finds the world difficult to negotiate. And we get to her when she's been, she's quite young. She's been expelled from 2 schools because she is simply not understood and she simply doesn't understand the rules. And in this school that she ends up in, let's say the health and safety rules are beyond outrageous. The teacher attitude is beyond outrageous, but it's very funny. The literalness and the pedantic sort of response from Little Alien to what people say to her, like a sentence like "Has the cat got your tongue?" would make no sense because she'd be looking for a cat. It's to that level of literalness, but beautifully, very, very cleverly done. This Little Alien makes friends with one other boy upon whose shoes she has vomited because she's fallen off the climbing frame and someone has said, well, that wasn't clever, stand up. Becomes sort of friends, doesn't know if she's a friend until the day that part of the ceiling falls into her food and she's told to eat around it, and he throws the food around the place and says everything is absolutely nonsense and unacceptable, and she suddenly works out what a friend is. And this friendship is the basis of our story. We're also looking at, it's how these two go on a jaunt together. So basically, Little Alien is fascinated with facts, with the world, how it turns, what is said about it, and one day comes across a documentary of the Voynich manuscript. And if you've never heard of it, it's worth looking up. A very strange book. Is it a hoax? Is it not a hoax? Written in the symbols that no one so far has managed to decode, with pictures of, it seems to be divided into sort of biology, botany, and very sciencey based. Does it come from another culture? And people have worked for a long time on this. So obviously, very strong metaphor, but it works. She's fascinated by it. She's fascinated by why people can't decode things. So she and her friend Bobby have to go to get to see it, which magically happens to be on display in London, and how they get access to it and all of that is a story that you have to read for yourselves. I loved this. I loved the relationship with Bobby that's so accepting on so many levels, but they're so literal and so critical of each other, and yet so resilient and persistent in keeping their relationship going. Little Alien has a sort of, a kind of erratic home life to a certain extent. Her mother is some days good and some days not so good, to the extent of sometimes having to be hospitalised. So something sort of bipolar-y. But the father seems to be quite a level-headed, grounding presence and very accepting. And he's a very beautiful character. I very much loved him. And also then there are the librarians. Partly because when things are difficult, little Alien runs to the library and is, although she's not meant to stay there and be babysitted by the librarians, sometimes she has no option. Oops, what have you seen? But the librarians teach her how to find out about the Voynich manuscript, encourage her to read, tell her what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in what she chooses to read. You've just got a leaf stuck to your twitums. It was funny, it's heartfelt, it's poignant. I'm not going to say it all works out, but because the friendship stretches and contracts and it doesn't always work, and little Alien doesn't always get to understand everything she wants to, even the answers of the Voynich manuscript. We don't know, she doesn't know, but it is about how this world can become manageable, particularly if you have that one friend, and if you are the parent of, or if you are that child that finds negotiating the world difficult, or someone who has that child. This book is just a balm, because it's a love letter to those children and to those parents. It's hopeful, and it's terribly, terribly funny, and extra footnotes all the way through it, which I love because it's a total representation of that diverse way of, like, I'm thinking this thing, oh, but hang on, there's this and this fact, and did you know that, and how it can go all over the shop. Every bonus you can think of, totally loved it. And that's it, I better go and sort out the leaf that has stuck itself to my dog's tail and calm him down because he can't decode what that is. See you next time.